panel is How the Election Has Changed and Expanded the Pro-Life Movement. Please welcome our panel, Marcie Little of Save the Storks, and documentarians Phelim McAleer and McElhinney. The panel is moderated by Sean Filer of the American Principles Project.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Sean Filer, and it's a great moment for the pro-life movement. As you all know, we're 5 weeks in, and we have a president who is keeping his promises, right? He's delivering on the pro-life agenda. We have Gorsuch, obviously, but we have Price at HHS. We've got Mexico City policy, not just renewed, but expanded, right? And we have the messaging as well. Not just the policy. We had Vice President Mike Pence at the pro-life march at the end of January for a historic address. And so the question is, how did this happen? I think many of us in the pro-life movement are wondering how in the world this happened. Just a year ago, on the eve of the pro-life march, the House of Representatives could not pass the 20-week ban. Right? We couldn't bring it up for a vote, even though that's supported by 65% of the American electorate. So what happened? How did we go from where we were a year ago to where we are today, where we're actually delivering on the pro-life agenda? And it's a really amazing story because it's being driven by a gentleman, President Trump, who spent his life in New York City. And I live in New York City. I don't know if any of you know much about New York City, but New York City has 36% of all viable pregnancies in New York City at last count were terminated in abortion. In Manhattan, it's 39%. In total, that's 1.4 million children that have been aborted just this century alone. And in that city, President Trump, while he was there as a private citizen, was not involved in the pro-life movement. So how does this happen? How does that gentleman become president and all of a sudden drive the pro-life movement in a way that he has, lead the pro-life movement in a way he has? And there's basically, I think, two possible explanations for this. One, personal conversion. Two, politics. Now, the first, I believe is true, I sincerely hope is true, but I can't prove it to you. The second, I know is true, and I can prove it to you. So let's talk about what President Trump has put an end to. He's put an end to the failed Republican strategy of personally confessing our adherence to the pro-life cause, and then equivocating when it came time to vote, to put it into action. Because we were afraid of the media. We were afraid of the media's narrative on abortion. But President Trump is not afraid. He's not afraid of the media. There we go. He's not afraid of the media's narrative on abortion. And he understood that if he could communicate directly to the American people, he could make the life issue not just a moral obligation, but a politically winning strategy. He also understood that his personal life, he's no Boy Scout, right, gave him the freedom to explain to the American people that abortion is the taking of a human life without adopting a moralizing tone and without suggesting any judgment. And that's a real breakthrough, and it's been an enormous breakthrough for the movement. So on the biggest stage imaginable, last October out in Las Vegas, the third presidential debate, now President Trump, then candidate Trump, nailed the Democratic Party's position on the life issue. He made clear to everybody exactly what they're for, which is taxpayer-funded abortion up until the moment of birth. And President Trump is smart enough to know, now having made the case, having taken on the mantle of the pro-life leader in America, America's pro-life leader, that if he doesn't deliver on the pro-life agenda, his political coalition falls apart. He simply doesn't have a broad enough range of social issues to fall back on. He's got the life issue. So as a result, from my perspective, the pro-life cause is no longer just at the heart of the Republican Party morally. The pro-life cause is at the heart of the Republican Party politically. And in large part, would that they could change, as they should, we have to credit the Democrats and the Democratic Party in some way for this political opportunity. So against all logic, they have dug themselves into an absolutely indefensible position, even over the last 4 years. So in 2012, they changed the Democratic platform to take out the word rare from Bill Clinton's famous phrasing on the issue of legal, safe, and rare. Now, that's just crazy. That's crazy morally, but that's crazy politically. And then last year, to watch Secretary Clinton force an extraction of Senator Kane's promise to support taxpayer funding for abortion and kind of remove the last little fig leaf this guy had as a pro-life Democrat. It was embarrassing. It was incredibly awkward. And it suggests to me that, I don't know, I guess you got to do something to get the Margaret Sanger Award, right? So Hillary Clinton absolutely deserved that. But the bigger point is that the pro-life cause, the pro-life agenda is no longer just the right thing to do morally, it's the right thing to do politically, and that's why President Trump's going to continue to deliver. He's going to defund Planned Parenthood, America's largest abortion provider, which at last count performed 324,000 abortions in the last year where they reported data. And he's going to give us another pro-life justice if the opportunity presents itself. And we pro-lifers, even those who doubted Trump, I think at this point, we really need to help maintain the momentum. We need to help maintain the political momentum in the pro-life movement. And so long as the president doesn't waver, we absolutely must not waver. And we must insist that Senator McConnell hold hearings on the 20-week bill that's going to pass through the House, and we can't let the Democrats frame this debate. We have to frame the debate on our terms, and that's the 20-week ban which we know that they're going to try to oppose. We also need to recognize that politics is the beginning of the change. There's a long road ahead for the movement. We have to translate political reality into cultural reality, into action, into new pro-life infrastructure, and that will support the culture of life. And I think if we do our job, if President Trump does his job, we'll eventually put this very ugly chapter, this ugly scar in the American experiment behind us. So with that, I want to open it up to our panel. We have a very esteemed panel here, Phelim and Claire and Marcie. Phelim and Ann are journalists. Phelim began his career as a journalist covering the Troubles in Northern Ireland. He served as a correspondent for the Financial Times in Eastern Europe, covered Romania, Bulgaria for The Economist. He also covered Ireland for the Sunday Times and has worked as a journalist filmmaker throughout the emerging world. In short, he's almost as qualified as his wife, Anne, who's also a journalist and a documentary filmmaker. She's made documentaries for the BBC, CBC, Canada, and the RTE in Ireland, and she has written for the Irish Times and the UK Sunday Times. And Marcie Little is creative director and the first employee of Save the Storks, creative director for an organization that helps pregnancy centers go to scale, makes them mobile, changes their marketing, and she has overseen really an incredibly innovative campaign that we're going to go into in some detail. But let me start with Phelim and Gosnell. So why Gosnell? Why that story? So Phelim and Ann have written and produced the definitive book on Gosnell, which, Ann, if you will hold up there, and movie. But why this topic? Why Gosnell?
Because we're journalists, actually, and it's a wonderful story. And I stumbled across the story by accident. I was in Pennsylvania promoting a documentary called Frack Nation, which some people may have heard of here. Yes, thank you. And I had a couple of days off, and as a journalist, when journalists get a couple of days off, they don't go to museums. They look at newspapers and see what interesting court cases are on in the locality. And I saw this one about this guy called Gosnell, and I went down, and I walked in, and I saw the picture of baby boy A, which was up on a big screen like that, and the testimony of the witness, and it was the most shocking picture I'd ever seen in my 25 years as a journalist. It was the most shocking testimony I'd ever heard. But even more shocking was behind me was the empty press seats. No journalists there. And I came home and I said to Anne, this is the story we're going to do. And she said, no, we're not. And I said, that's fine. I did the sneaky thing then of ordering the transcripts and presented them to Anne. And once she read them for a few days, and in a few days she said, this is the story we have to do. It's a truth that nobody knows. Yeah. I think you said we have to change it culturally. And I think, you have to make abortion unfashionable. People don't realise what abortion is. I didn't realise what abortion was. I wanted to do this as a news story, as a wonderful crime story. I didn't want to do it as a pro-life story. I wasn't a pro-life activist. I was a journalist. But boy, when you get in, we described ourselves as neutral on abortion, and when you get in and you see what abortion is, anybody who calls himself neutral on abortion is pro-abortion. You know, and I didn't realise that. But it's true, and we have to make people realise what they are pro. Because they don't know. They think they're pro-choice. They think they're pro-cells being removed. And we say Planned Parenthood are geniuses. Don't underestimate them. They've managed to make one of the most barbaric processes and procedures that you ever have seen in your life. They've managed to make it this rallying cry for women, you know, for certain types of women. It's a progressive rallying cry. And I mean, honestly, if you knew what goes on in an abortion, and that changed the jury. Everyone involved in the Gosnell trial moved from pro-neutral or pro-choice to pro-life or I don't know what to think.
So you met him?
We met Gosnell. Yes, he really liked Anne.
Oh. I'm sorry. So, why did he do it?
He's a serial killer. He kept trophies. He cut the feet of babies, put them in nice little jars with labels on them. He took pictures of his patients' private parts, and he collected them. He's a collector. He's greedy as well. Enormous amount of money in it. Of course, that's never mentioned at all. He owned 17 properties, and he had $250,000 in cash in his house. And he loved playing God. He's a serial killer who loved playing God, and he's a snob. I think he's an anti-human. He pretended to help the impoverished black community. I think, in truth, he despised the impoverished black community. He treated black people differently from white people. White people got better rooms, better treatment. So he's a racist snob / serial killer. And, by the way, the community told him, the circles he moved in, he was nominated for Young Philadelphian of the Year. He was an abortionist. That's the community. Everyone told him he was a wonderful guy. So why wouldn't you keep doing it? So we need, you know.
So and you came as well from a investigative journalist background, more of a neutral position,
yes,
or disinterested in abortion, or not immersed in it. What was it that really surprised you the most as you're going through the process of discovering what he did, and what was shocking?
I think on one level, I think Gosnell himself is somehow easier. You can kind of get your head around it. Like, this is a serial killer. He's like a Hannibal Lecter character. As Phelim said, we met him in prison. He touched my leg continuously, sang to me in French. He's straight out of central casting for a creep. I'll tell you what was profoundly disturbing to me. There were loads of people working for him. And by the way, they were having a really good time. So they joked around. I mean, the scenes of carnage around them. Steve Massoff, for me, was extremely disturbing. Some of you guys that know the story really well would know who Steve Massoff was. He was a doctor but never got a residency, but he had a medical degree. Worked for Gosnell as a pretend doctor, but he had a medical degree, was from a nice family. And he took the stand. Gosnell never took the stand in his own defense. And Steve Massoff spoke. And under pain of perjury, under oath, and the scenes he described, to me, were extraordinary. And I suppose for me, it was that thing of, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act. Lots and lots of people knew this was going on. So women were turning up in hospitals in Philadelphia, I mean, with literally pieces of babies hanging out of them. And by the way, there's a scene in the book, this is not in the movie, by the way, there's a scene in the book of a girl who goes for an abortion, and her cousins wait for her across the road in a pizzeria. They start coming back and back. Some of you guys know this story. They're coming back and looking for her all the time, and they're not let into the clinic. Eventually they get in. Long story. They say to the people who have the doors locked, we're going to get the cops if you don't let us in. They go in, their cousin is lying there. She's covered in blood. She's naked from the waist down. And Gosnell says, yeah, we've had a bit of a problem this evening, you probably need to take her to the hospital, but he hasn't organised an ambulance. They start to stumble this woman out of the building, this young woman, and then Gosnell comes with a container and says, well, you better bring this to show the hospital the bits that I got.
Oh my goodness.
And so the hospital received that container. Here's what I find really disturbing, and I find this super disturbing. I like to have a couple of beers in the evening, so I haven't had a beer yet, so you're safe enough on the language, and I know this is a conservative situation. But the people who worked in Harrisburg, in pristine offices in Harrisburg, people who had medical backgrounds, nurses, they are despicable. These are really bad people. I'll tell you how I know they're bad. 2 women died. Samika Shaw was a 22-year-old black woman who died in 2000 from a botched abortion. Karna Mayamongar was a Bhutanese refugee. She spent 20 years in a refugee camp in Nepal with a tin roof. Came to America and was dead 4 months later because of Gosnell's untrained staff. And the bureaucrats in Harrisburg never got into their car. They never left Harrisburg. They never crossed the threshold. And some of you guys know, we did the fracking film, and I've heard so much nonsense about anti-fracking nonsense, about the children. We've got to be careful about the children. They couldn't care less about children. These people in the Harrisburg Department of Health, they couldn't care less about children. They have no interest in children. They have no interest in women's health. None. These are people with nursing backgrounds, and they never left those offices. That's what disgusts me and makes me, I found that frightening. Nothing would get them out of their offices. Nothing would get them to go and work out what happened to Samika Shaw, what happened to Karna Mayamongar. You know, we're living in a country here, by the way, where Michael Brown, they want to put up a monument to Michael Brown. Michael Brown was a thug who assaulted an immigrant in a corner shop in Ferguson, Missouri, walked up the middle of the street and tried to beat a police officer to death and died for his trouble. And we all know his name, and I mean everyone on the planet Earth knows his name, and no one knows the name of Samika Shaw. And no one knows the story of Baby Boy A, but I'll tell you one thing, by the time we're finished, they will. Baby Boy A, and I just think, I was off the wagon on my faith, on my own personal faith. I'm a Catholic. I was well off the wagon for a really long time, and I can tell you that this story brought me back to prayer. Because things happened So Baby Boy A shares a birthday with my own father, the 12th of July, and he was born on the 12th of July, 2008. And he was the baby that was joked about. This baby's so big, he could walk me to the bus stop. And he was thrown into a Tupperware container, and he curled himself up. And Karima Cross, on the stand, was asked by the prosecutor, could you stand up? Can you show the jury what the baby did? And she curled herself. This is what the jury had to go through. You'd think the jury weren't changed by that? The jury all were changed by that. And she curled herself up because he curled himself up to try and protect himself. And then Gosnell killed him 20 minutes later. But here's what that child did. And Phelim makes a really good point about this. Many people will live a really long life and maybe die in their 80s and will never have done anything consequential. And I don't mean that in any sort of insulting way. This baby is consequential. Baby Boy A matters. He has changed people's lives. I have met them. They write to me on the Gosnell Movie Facebook page. Please write to me on the Gosnell Movie Facebook page and give $1 to the gosnellmovie.com. Join the 29,000 people. But that baby has changed people's lives. 2 people took a picture of him, Adrian Moten and Karima Cross, and that nailed Gosnell.
So let me bring in Marcie here. So we have now 2 journalists that have written now the definitive history on Gosnell, made a movie, made the journey, you've seen the reality. What's wrong with the messaging in the pro-life movement? Why didn't we convince them before they stumbled across this courtroom that was empty in Philadelphia? What as a movement are we not doing from a messaging perspective?
I think for too long we have not challenged the assumption that abortion is good for women and that abortion is good health care for women, and we've allowed that narrative to win the day. And we don't hear these stories of women whose lives are being destroyed, who are losing their lives in the abortion clinics, and nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about the consequences for women. NARAL, Pro-Choice of America, founded their organization on lies, and they got Planned Parenthood into the abortion industry. All of the numbers that they made up in the early days that they used were made up.
Bernard Nathanson has told us this. The guy who did it has told us this.
In his writings afterwards.
Yes.
And nobody listens to him because they decided very early on that this could not remain a moral issue. It needed to be a medical issue. It has to be a decision between a woman and her doctor, and it has to be a personal choice. Yeah. But the travesty here is women don't talk to their doctors about the abortion procedure. They don't talk to any doctors about the abortion procedure. They talk to the receptionists at Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics who have abortion quotas, we know this, that they have to meet. And they're being manipulated. They're being lied to and deceived into thinking that this is women's health. I help run our social media for Save the Storks. I've been doing that for the last 4 years since I joined. And I sit on the receiving end of the stories we get on a weekly and sometimes daily basis of women who have had abortions and walked through that struggle and through that story. And they're full of regret. I don't know where they get these stories of the women who are proud of their abortions and shout their abortion, because the stories we hear are the complete opposite, and they don't have a place aside from messaging us anonymously on Facebook to share their story, because it goes against the narrative. So no one else is sharing their stories. But the common question that they all ask is, where were you?
So what are you doing differently? What is Save the Storks? So this is the problem. This is what do you, from a messaging perspective, do differently?
We tell their stories, and we go right where they are. So we have mobile medical units. You've got to get back to our bus in the exhibit hall. We have a bus in there, and we offer them free resources right outside the door of an abortion clinic. Our messaging is women-centric. It's women first. We focus on how empowering it is to give women real information. So they see the ultrasound right before they go into the clinic. We offer them a free service. And 4 out of 5 women who see their child perfectly formed on the ultrasound and hear the heartbeat in our mobile units choose life. At the first mobile unit we had on the road, this young woman was the first one. And my introduction, by the way, to the pro-life movement was Gosnell. I was coming into the office every day learning about the work of pro-life ministries and pro-life groups and reading the horror stories coming out of this clinic. And so it was a year later, we finally had our first mobile unit on the road, and we got our first story. And I want to share her story with you today. Her name's Elia. She was 28 years old and already had 3 children. She was terminally ill, didn't think she could bring another child into the world, and she was headed into our nation's oldest abortion clinic in Englewood, New Jersey, for a late-term abortion to terminate the life of her child. And so she notices as she's approaching the clinic this bright-colored blue van that says something about hope is all she remembers. And she was invited in for the ultrasound, and that pregnancy center in her own community was connected to her, gave her the resources she needed that actually empowered her. They didn't withhold information. They gave her the ultrasound. She saw the perfectly formed image of her child and chose life for that child. And she can't project what that child's future will be. She doesn't know what her own future will be, but she was so impacted by that. And she was the first of 394 women on that mobile unit in 1 year to choose life.
So Ann, back to you. What does the movement need to do? What does the pro-life movement need to do? What are we...
Well, I think you asked a very interesting question there. Like, I mean, I'm a huge consumer of television. I watch all the bad television, you know, everything. I'm into everything. I read an awful lot of magazines. I never knew any of this. And by the way, you guys know James Delingpole, right? You know James Delingpole from Breitbart. Anyway, we love James Delingpole. He's from England. He's got one of those accents. He's very posh. And I just talked to him this morning. He did an interview with us this morning. And I said, you know, what I was amazed with and angry about was what I didn't know. So I didn't know that you could have an abortion in America completely legally at 9 months. And not just in one place, but in loads of places. And basically, this is James Delingpole. When I said that, he went... And I said, you see, you didn't know that. So people don't know that. And what I say, by the way, when I go around the country and I'm asked to speak, I say to all the pro-life groups I go to, I say to them, you know what you should do? One thing you should do, tell the people in your state what the law is. Because I can tell you the people in Pennsylvania didn't like the law that they have there, which is 24 weeks. People in New Mexico need to know that it's 9 months. They need to be told that. There should be huge posters up just saying, did you know you can have an abortion here at 9 months? And I can tell you, people don't like it. The jury didn't like it in the Gosnell case. So I would say one of the things that I think is missing is, how did I not know any of this? And I suppose one thing, and I think you read this in the book probably, Sean, but one of the things I have to be completely honest with you, I didn't trust pro-lifers, I'm sorry. And I always thought that the pictures were photoshopped. Well, I've seen the photographs that came out of the 47 bodies that were presented by the ME, and those were obviously evidence in a trial, so they were unimpeachable. And I know now what life looks like and how perfect those children are. There's one, you know, they have expression. They don't only have perfect fingers and toes, they have expression. One of the children has his finger up, like an admonition. It's extraordinary. So I think where I would say you're failing is, tell people the law. I've had stand-up rows with people in Pennsylvania, pro-choice people, who said, you're wrong. You can't have an abortion here at 6 months. And I'm going, I mean, I don't know what I'm meant to do. Do I walk around with a statute? But people need to walk around with a statute.
So we're out of time. The movie and the book is out, and
the book is out, gosnellbook.com. We're signing tomorrow at midday. The movie is going to come out in the fall. Go to gosnellmovie.com. We have 29,000 donors. We should have 500,000.
And Marcie, you have your mobile unit in the lobby.
We have a mobile unit. Come by. We're funded entirely by $30 a month donors for the most part.
Great.
We need your time, talents, and resources if we're going to continue to keep the momentum that's going in the pro-life movement. So come talk to us. I'll show you Elia's picture when you're...
And it's Save the Storks.
Save the Storks, SaveTheStorks.com.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.